They called him just Eddie. Not Mr. Jameson. Not Sir. Just Eddie. The kind of name people give when they have already decided you do not matter. Eddie Jameson, 74, worked the West Gate at Worthington Military Academy. Every morning at 5:45 sharp, he arrived in a faded security jacket with a patched name tag, a steaming thermos in hand, and a calm nod for every cadet who passed. Most did not return it. He walked to work, always to the young officers and cadets. He was invisible, an old man with creaky knees, a clipboard, and outdated ideas. Some whispered jokes behind his back. Others did not even whisper. Lieutenant Carter, one of the Academy's rising stars, once quipped, "Bet he thinks Morse code still wins wars." Eddie said nothing. What they did not know, what no one bothered to ask, was that he once led hundreds across foreign soil under moonless skies, that he carried medals in a shoe box under his bed, that his silence was not weakness, it was experience, choosing not to waste itself. At lunch, he sat alone. Same meal every day. Black coffee, a sandwich, one apple. His notebook always nearby, filled with observations no one knew he was making. He did not talk much, but he saw everything. Cadet Arya Bennett was one of the few who noticed. She had saluted him on her first day. He had returned it without hesitation. "My father said never judge a man by his title," she told him. "Smart father," Eddie replied. She watched as he moved, measured, precise, never in a hurry. She noticed how he scanned the tree line when others stared at their phones. How he tested the gate latch 3 times before logging off. The others dismissed him, but she saw something else. Not a man stuck in the past. A man waiting. And waiting, she would soon learn, was not an action. It was preparation. By the second week of September, the jokes had stopped being subtle. Does Eddie even know what a drone looks like? I swear I heard him ask if GPS still needed batteries. Careful. Do not breathe too hard near the old guy. He might blow away. Cadets laughed in passing. Officers chuckled in break rooms. No one ever said it to Eddie's face, but they did not need to. Their tone said enough. To them, Eddie Jameson was harmless, outdated, decorative. He worked the West Gate. He nodded. He drank coffee. That was it. But in truth, it was not their words that cut deepest. It was the tone, the casual dismissal, the way they all assumed he had had his time and missed his chance. He was tolerated. Background. A prop in a uniform. Lieutenant Carter, always the loudest voice in the room, seemed to make a personal sport of it. Young, decorated, and loud, Carter was everything Eddie was not. He marched fast, spoke sharp, and quoted military doctrine like scripture. One afternoon in the officers' lounge, Carter leaned over his lunch tray and gestured toward the window where Eddie could be seen checking the outer fence. "You know," he said, smirking, "I did some digging. Turns out our gate guy used to be nothing. Not even enlisted. Civilian contractor, they say." A few cadets laughed, relieved they were not the target. "You sure?" another asked. "Positive," Carter said confidently. "That is why he keeps that notebook, so he does not forget his name." More laughter. From the corner, Cadet Arya Bennett said nothing. But she watched. The following day, Eddie was repairing the old security keypad outside the Eastern Barracks. The keypad had been acting up for weeks, but no one else bothered with it. Eddie, quietly and without request, had brought his tools and gone to work. As he knelt, a pair of boots approached, shined to perfection. "Lieutenant Carter, need help, old man?" he asked, arms crossed, mock concern dripping from every syllable. Eddie looked up, then returned to adjusting a loose wire. "No," he said simply. "No, sir," Carter corrected, half laughing. "We do still use rank around here." Eddie stood slowly, not defensive, just calm. "Did not realize gate duty required salutes," he said. Carter leaned in slightly. "Everything requires respect, especially from the help." For a long moment, the two men just stood there, one puffed up, full of youthful certainty, the other still as stone. Eddie finally spoke. "Respect is not given by stripes. It is revealed by silence." Carter scoffed. "Yeah, well, silence does not stop intruders." Then he walked away. That night, Arya walked past the security booth and found Eddie alone, sipping his coffee and jotting notes by dim light. She hesitated at the door. "I heard what Carter said," she began softly. "He does not know you." Eddie did not look up. "He does not need to." "But he should," she said. Eddie turned to her then. His eyes were calm, but serious. "I am not here to be known. I am here to see what others miss." She nodded, unsure of what to say next. Before she could turn to leave, he added, "They always laugh until they cannot afford to." The next day, during a mock breach drill, the alarm system failed to engage on time. A delay barely noticeable, but enough to cost them seconds. Lieutenant Carter blamed technical interference. Cadets grumbled about faulty programming. But Eddie, he was already at the main panel that morning examining the timestamps. He made no announcement, no accusations. Instead, he adjusted the system clock manually and noted the calibration error, something the automated system had failed to correct for weeks. By noon, the security alerts were running in perfect sync. Carter took the credit in front of command. Eddie said nothing, but Arya saw. She always did. By week's end, something began to shift. Not with Carter or the officers, but among the cadets. Some started greeting Eddie by name. Some asked quiet questions about perimeter zones or weather patterns. One even stopped by the booth and asked awkwardly if Eddie had ever served. Eddie only smiled long enough to know better. And still the jokes persisted. Carter continued holding court with his back slapping bravado and derisive humor. He talked about combat like it was a video game. He barked commands like volume proved worth. But Arya had started listening to someone else, watching someone else. Because while others laughed at the man who took his time checking locks, she realized something important. The ones who walk slow often see farther. It happened on a Thursday, just before dusk. As the academy prepared for evening drills, the perimeter system glitched only for a moment. A flicker on the southeast camera. Most would have missed it. Eddie did not. He rewound the feed, eyes narrowing. A shadow moved where it should not have. No sound, no alert, just a quiet disturbance near the tree line. He called it in. Possible breach. Southeast quadrant. Recommend inspection. Lieutenant Carter's voice crackled back, dismissive. No confirmation. Probably just a raccoon. We are not chasing ghosts, Eddie. But Eddie did not laugh. Instead, he signed out for a maintenance sweep and walked the perimeter with his flashlight. The air was damp, heavy still. He found what he was looking for near the drainage culvert. Footprints. Not cadet boots. Civilian. Deep and recent. Too fresh to ignore. The next day, he filed a silent report. Not through official channels. He knew better. Just a folded note on Langston's desk. Fence line compromised. Internal systems blind. There was no response. But that night, the breach returned. Two figures slipped through the blind spot. Quiet, precise, gone before alarms triggered. And Eddie, watching from his booth, knew in his bones. This was not practice anymore. The fourth breach came with no warning. No blaring alarms. No red lights. Just a blackout. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Worthington Military Academy went dark. Power failed across the campus. Cameras dropped. Gates froze. For 13 full minutes, the entire security system was blind. Cadets stirred in. Their bunks. Lights flickered but never returned. Some thought it was a drill. Others, a storm. Only one man understood the truth before anyone else did. Eddie Jameson was already standing. He had not slept. He never did during storms. While others scrambled for flashlights, Eddie was walking the north fence line. Rain slicked his coat. The wind bit into his bones, but his steps were sure. At the southeast culvert, he stopped. Footprints again, but this time different. He knelt, pressed his hand to the muddy ground. The imprint was fresh, deep. Not one pair. Two. And they were not running. They were coordinated. He reached for his radio. Static. The blackout had severed comms, so he moved swiftly, silently across campus. Lieutenant Carter shouted orders in the dark. Secure the barracks. Lock down the mess hall. Give me a status report. But there was no status. No visibility. No control. And that is when Carter realized something chilling. He was not in charge anymore. No one was. At 2:34 a.m., the emergency generator finally kicked in. Lights surged back on, but it was already too late. The intruders were gone. No evidence left behind but a broken latch and a deactivated sensor still blinking red. Carter stormed into the control room, barking demands, furious and humiliated. Who let this happen? The answer came not from the staff, but from a notebook. Eddie placed it on the console, opened to a page with precise times, locations, and breach patterns charted over a week. You were warned, he said simply. You chose not to listen. Carter's face flushed. You should have told me directly. Eddie met his gaze. I did. Then he walked out past cadets who now stood a little straighter when he passed. And for the first time, they saluted first. The morning after the blackout, Worthington felt different. Not because of the weather or the system's rebooting, but because no one could quite look at Eddie Jameson the same way. They tried. Carter pretended nothing had happened. Cadets returned to drills, but whispers moved faster than formation calls. He knew. He had it all written down. That notebook was not just for show. Someone had even scanned a page. It circulated through dorms like contraband, an intricate hand-drawn map of the perimeter with breach intervals down to the second. Someone else murmured the word commander. That afternoon, General Langston arrived. No convoy, no ceremony, just a black sedan and a folder tucked under her arm. She walked straight into the security office where Carter stood reviewing the overnight logs again, desperately searching for some defense, some excuse. Langston did not ask permission. She spoke clearly. You dismissed multiple warnings. Carter stiffened. We had no verified threat. You had Eddie Jameson. He flinched. With all due respect. He said he is a gate guard. Langston opened the folder. Inside, a single photo. A younger man. Sharper jaw. Darker hair. But unmistakably Eddie. He stood beside Langston years ago, both in full combat gear. Then why? She said, laying the photo on the desk, is he standing next to me in Afghanistan as my commanding officer? The room went still. Carter's face drained. Whoa. What? Langston's tone did not shift. He led black operations in 3 regions, built the threat response doctrine you skimmed in basic. The only reason this place is not on the news is because a man you dismissed still did the job you were too proud to learn. She closed the folder. You have been relieved of security oversight, effective immediately. Outside, Eddie stood at the gate as usual, nodding at each cadet who passed. Only now the nods came back with more weight, more hesitation, more understanding. Cadet Arya approached with a small, quiet salute. Sir, she said, voice firm. They are saying you wrote the engagement manuals we use. Eddie gave a small shrug. Someone had to. She smiled. Then maybe it is time we actually read them. They did not call it a ceremony. No speeches. No flag folding. Just a briefing in the academy's main hall. Mandatory attendance, but every seat was filled. Cadets sat in silence. Officers stood in the back. The podium remained empty longer than expected. Then General Langston entered. She did not bring charts. She brought a name. Edward Jameson, she began. Some of you knew him as just Eddie. A man you overlooked. A man you dismissed. She let the silence settle before continuing. You mocked experience. You ignored pattern. And you almost paid the price. No one dared move. He prevented a breach with no weapons, no rank, no title. Just judgment earned over decades. Judgment that was silenced by ego. Then she stepped back, and Eddie walked in. Same uniform. Same quiet steps. He said nothing at first. Just looked out at the room that had once seen him as invisible. I did not stop the breach to prove anything. He said finally. I did it because it was my post, and you protect what is in front of you. A pause. That is what leadership is. Not shouting. Not medals. It is knowing who is watching when you are not looking. He turned to leave, then stopped. And if any of you want to learn that, really learn it, I will be at the gate. Later that week, a new sign was mounted at the west entrance. Jameson Post, in honor of Steadfast Watch. Eddie did not ask for it, did not even comment. But when he passed it, coffee in hand, he did something he had not done in 4 years. He smiled, just a little. Eddie never said goodbye. No announcement. No farewell lunch. One morning, the west gate simply opened without him. A note was left behind, folded neatly on the desk. The watch never ends. It just changes hands. And with that, he was gone. They searched for him at first, called, emailed, no answer. But every cadet, every officer knew it was not a disappearance. It was a handover of the torch. Arya Bennett now stood where Eddie once did. Same posture, same steady gaze. And beside her, pinned inside the booth, was Eddie's notebook, open to the final page. 6 words. Honor is earned in silence daily. No lectures, no doctrine, just a sentence that had become truth. Months passed. New cadets arrived. They heard the stories. How a quiet gate guard once outsmarted intruders, saved the compound, and humbled leadership with a single notebook. Most thought it was just legend until they met Arya. Until they saw how she paused before every decision, how she walked the fence before sunrise, how she trained new guards, not in tactics, but in patience. She never raised her voice, but somehow they obeyed. On a quiet spring afternoon, A black SUV stopped briefly at the gate. An older man in a worn coat stepped out just long enough to leave something at the post. A box wrapped in canvas. Inside, a folded uniform untouched, and a note scribbled in familiar handwriting. For whoever watches next, make it matter. No return address, no signature, just a legacy they never saw coming, but would never forget. Eddie Jameson was never one for speeches. He never told people to respect him, never demanded loyalty, never once said, "I used to be somebody." But he did not have to, because every day in every quiet choice, he lived by 5 words he never spoke out loud. Be steady. Speak only when needed. He showed it when he stood at the gate in pouring rain, even when no one noticed. He showed it when he did not strike back at the laughter. He showed it when he warned them gently, quietly of the breach they chose not to believe. And he showed it most clearly when after the truth came out, he refused the attention, refused the title. He did not need to reclaim his rank. He had already reclaimed their trust. At Worthington Academy, they still call it Jameson Post. New cadets are told the story during orientation, not through a slideshow or a commemorative plaque, but by walking the perimeter at dawn in silence, just like Eddie did. Cadet Arya Bennett, now Lieutenant Bennett, keeps his notebook sealed behind glass, not to preserve it, but to remind everyone that leadership is not loud. It listens, it waits, it watches, and when it speaks, it means something. So, no, Eddie Jameson never said the 5 words, but the Academy still echoes with them. In every pause before judgment, in every salute offered first, in every young leader who learns, silence earned through service carries more power than any command.